Unaware his wife was pregnant with his first child and had just become the silent owner of a real estate fortune, Tunde Adaora stood on the driveway of their Lagos compound and told her she was no longer his wife. To him, Adaora was a dead end, a barren mistake who had turned his Surulere house into a gallery of hospital reports and unanswered prayers. He believed he was finally upgrading his life, trading the quiet woman in a yellow dress for the smiling girlfriend in green whose pregnancy he paraded like a trophy. But as he pointed toward the gate and Cynthia's laughter wrapped around his insults, he didn't know a tiny heartbeat was already pulsing under that yellow fabric, carrying his blood. He didn't know that while he was planning a second wedding, a lawyer in Victoria Island had just signed papers that made Adaora the majority owner of Queensbridge Realty, worth billions. So, what happens when the man who boasts that he escaped a barren curse discovers she was never empty at all? When the woman he sent out of his compound returns as the faceless boss behind every deal he needs to survive? And what will Tunde do when he realizes Adaora's next move is not to beg for a place in his life, but to decide whether he still has one? Adaora once believed that a marriage could survive anything if both people held onto it with the same hands. Her mother had told her that Lagos husbands change like traffic lights, but a wise woman stays patient, prays, and keeps her home neat enough for miracles to land. So when month after month slipped by with negative pregnancy tests and polite hospital results, Adaora did not accuse God or challenge Tunde. She brewed herbs from elderly aunties in Enugu, clutched small bottles of anointing oil under her pillow, and whispered prayers at 3 a.m. while her husband snored through every whispered verse. Their story had started like a simple Surulere dream. A crowded traditional wedding where jollof and high-life music flowed together, honeymoon selfies at Elagushi Beach, plans sketched in biro on the back of takeaway receipts about opening a small restaurant, and one day buying land in Lekki. When Tunde's position in a property firm began to rise, she followed him with a full heart. She believed his success would stretch their lives wider, give their children better schools and their parents better hospitals. Instead, the higher he climbed, the smaller she felt inside his shadow. Little by little, marriage turned her into a background sound. She became the woman behind the curtains of their rented duplex, cooking food that fueled his late-night meetings, ironing the shirts he wore when he wanted to impress investors, sending him voice notes full of prayers before every presentation. Each new month ended with one faint line on the test strip, a doctor reminding her that stress can delay conception, and the heavy silence of Tunde's disappointment settling over the house like humidity. The doctors never said anything was wrong with her body. One gentle gynecologist in Yaba mentioned rest, diet, and hope. Tunde heard something else entirely. In his mind, every friend with a child was proof that he had married badly. One evening, without raising his voice, he told her she had brought bad luck into his lineage. From that day, the word barren followed her around the house like an odor only he could smell. His mother's eyes lingered too long on her flat stomach during Christmas. Neighbors made stray comments about adoption and second wives. Even the clatter of cutlery at dinner started to feel like judgment. When Cynthia slid into his life, it did not look like the beginning of the end. She arrived first as a name in passing, one of the girls at the office, then as a contact on his phone with a laughing selfie as a display picture. Cynthia dressed like Lagos owed her attention, bright greens and reds, bodycon gowns, sleek wigs, the kind of woman who turned supermarket aisles into runways. Her laughter started leaking into the house through Tunde's speakerphone, then into his WhatsApp stories, then into the gaps where Adaora's voice used to live. By the time he stopped hiding her, Adaora's prayers had grown quieter. Tunde posted pictures from dinners where Cynthia's hand rested boldly on his shoulder. He justified everything as networking and client entertainment, even when he came home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. The night he told Adaora he needed space, the sky over Surulere was thick with heat. There were no smashed plates, no neighbors watching from balconies, just the calm of a man who had already decided to move on. A few weeks later, space turned into eviction. The sun sat directly above the compound the morning Tunde decided to erase her from his story. The concrete of the driveway glared white, the air too bright to hide any shame. Adaora stood near the steps of the duplex in a fitted yellow dress that clung gently around the unfamiliar curve of her belly. She had blamed the tightness on stress and too much bread. One hand gripped a small black handbag. The other kept drifting unconsciously toward her stomach, as if trying to shield something she hadn't named yet. In front of her, Tunde stood in a navy suit, chest puffed, fingers stabbing the air as if he were dealing with a troublesome tenant instead of the woman who once shared roasted corn with him under a faulty streetlight. His voice carried across the compound, loud enough for the security guard and the neighbor's curtains. To him, Adaora was wasted time, wasted years, wasted seed. Beside him, Cynthia in a sleeveless green dress curled her hand around his arm, her baby bump rounded and obvious, her smile wide and amused. She rubbed her stomach as if presenting evidence to the world that Tunde was healthy and Adaora was the problem. Behind them, a shiny black SUV gleamed silently in the heat, ready to take Tunde and Cynthia to yet another ultrasound appointment. The guards stared at the floor, pretending not to hear. Somewhere above, a curtain shifted as a neighbor tried to record the scene without being noticed. The humiliation was not private. It baked into Adaora's skin with the same intensity as the sun. Tunde announced, with the casual finality of a man closing an account, that Cynthia and her baby were his real family now. He told Adaora that he could not allow a barren curse to hold him back any longer, that she needed to leave before he changed his mind about letting her go, gently. Every word landed like a slap she refused to raise her hands against. For a moment, the world narrowed to the sound of Cynthia's laughter and the distant honk of traffic outside the estate gate. Adaora did not argue. She did not list the years she branded his CV, ironed his clothes, or prayed over contracts she never saw. She swallowed the metallic taste rising in her throat, squared her shoulders as much as her dizziness allowed, and turned toward the gate. As she walked, tears slipped from her eyes in hot, steady lines. The yellow dress clung to her belly, as if the fabric itself knew what she carried. She felt a strange flutter low inside her, a tightening, a small roll, something that felt disturbingly like a tiny protest, but she told herself it was only hunger and stress. When the gate slid open and she stepped onto the street, the house behind her erupted in laughter. Cynthia's voice rose above the rest, sharp and triumphant. The guard closed the gate quietly, as if sealing off an old chapter. Adaora kept moving, one slow step after another, until the compound disappeared behind parked cars and dusty signboards. She waved down a kiki, then changed her mind and ordered an e-hailing ride to a cheap short-let apartment she had seen online, somewhere quiet where she could be anonymous. The car's interior was cool, the driver polite and silent, but the world around her would not stop spinning. Buildings blurred past in streaks of color. Her head pounded. That flutter in her belly returned, stronger, like the tapping of a small hand inside. She pressed her palm there, whispering that she would be fine, that everything would settle once she reached the apartment and lay down. She did not make it that far. Halfway through the journey, her vision dimmed at the edges. The driver's voice sounded like it was underwater. When the car pulled up in front of the short-let and she tried to stand, her knees buckled. The last thing she felt was her bag slipping from her fingers and a cool rush of evening air on her face as someone shouted for help. Hours later, in a small private hospital not far from the island, Adaora lay under bright lights with a cuff on her arm, and the ghost of that driveway was still thundering in her ears. A nurse moved gently around her, asking quiet questions. A doctor studied a screen with a frown that slowly softened into something else. Outside, Lagos carried on, oblivious. Inside that tiny room, a new chapter of her life was seconds away from being named. But before the ultrasound could rewrite everything she believed about her body and her future, there had been years of late-night noodles, borrowed dreams, and small compromises that led her to that driveway in the first place. To understand the genius of what Adaora would one day do, you first have to understand the girl who once thought love alone was enough to keep a home standing. And that story begins long before the woman in yellow walks away. Adaora's story didn't begin under hospital lights. It began years earlier in a cramped one-room apartment in Surulere, where the ceiling fan rattled like an old radio and dreams were louder than the generator outside. Back then, Tunde was just the boy who shared her love for roadside noodles and late-night gist. They met in front of a buka after fellowship, both reaching for the last boiled egg in the tray. He'd laughed, surrendered it to her, and walked her home under a sky full of impatient stars, talking about how one day he would leave this kind of Surulere suffering and buy land on the island. Those early days were simple. They sat on the edge of his thin mattress, sketching plans on the backs of receipts. Ada's Kitchen, a small restaurant that would serve jollof, grilled fish, and memories. When they finally married in a modest church ceremony, they didn't care that their first house was a self-contained room with peeling paint. They prayed together at night, shared bread and tea in the mornings, and told each other that once money came, everything else would follow. Cars, property, children. Money did come, slowly at first. Tunde's real estate firm began to trust him with bigger clients. He started wearing suits more often, spending longer hours in offices with glass doors and air conditioning that smelled like success. They moved from the tiny room to a small flat, then to the duplex with the shiny tiles and the driveway that would one day witness her humiliation. Through every move, Adaora believed they were building a foundation for the children who would soon run across the floors. But the months passed, and her body stayed quiet. At first, the negative tests were brushed off with optimism. "It will happen," the doctor said, eyes kind. Adaora clung to their reassurance, changing her diet, taking vitamins, lying still after each cycle as if gravity could help. She went for blood tests in Yaba, swallowed bitter herb sent from village aunties, and traced scriptures into her notebook at midnight. Tunde prayed with her at the beginning, hands clasped, forehead pressed against hers. Then he started leaving her to pray alone. The silence in their bedroom thickened. His mother's visits became heavier too. Her eyes hovered on Adaora's flat stomach, her words dipped in concern but sharpened with judgment. Neighbors teased lightly about, "When we are coming to eat," naming food, and Tunde's responses grew shorter each time. The world around Adaora seemed to measure her worth by the empty space beneath her navel. Then, slowly, Tunde changed. Disappointment hardened into irritation. It came first in small sighs, then in careless sentences. He began saying she worried too much, that her overthinking was chasing children away. When the tests stayed negative after another year, he said she had turned his house into a clinic. Month after month, she watched him retreat, first emotionally, then physically. Late nights at work became normal. His phone grew more secretive. Laughter she didn't recognize spilled through his speaker. Cynthia entered their lives as a name on his lips, one of the smart girls at the office. She arrived at company dinners in bright gowns that caught every light, her perfume lingering on his shirts long after he returned home. Adaora saw the notifications on his phone, the late-night messages, the saved photos from outings labeled client events. When she asked soft questions, he snapped, accusing her of insecurity, of ingratitude for the life he was building. Eventually, he stopped hiding. Pictures of him and Cynthia appeared on his status. Her hand on his chest, her smile wide, her green dress hugging a body that did not yet show any curve of pregnancy. He tagged the posts jokingly as work mode, as if the whole world was too naive to read between the pixels. Nights he once spent with Adaora discussing menus and baby names were replaced by empty space on his side of the bed and the dim glow of his phone in another woman's palm. By the time he told Adaora he needed a break, she already knew what that word meant. It meant vacancy. It meant that the door she had walked through as a bride no longer had her name on it. She stayed because she had nowhere to go, hoping that if she kept the house clean and her heart soft, something would shift. Instead, the shift came as a finger pointed at the gate, a woman in green laughing, and a yellow dress walking away. The next thing she remembered after collapsing near the shortlet was the sharp smell of antiseptic and a ceiling fan spinning above her head. A nurse hovered at her side, checking her pulse with gentle fingers. Her neighbor, the one who had helped drag her to the car, sat nearby looking guilty and worried. The room was small but clean. Somewhere beyond the door, a baby cried, then quieted. The doctor arrived with a clipboard and a tired, professional smile. He asked questions about stress, diet, her cycle. He pressed lightly on her abdomen, frowning, then suggesting an ultrasound, just to be sure. Adaora lay still as the gel cooled her skin, her eyes fixed on the dull glow of the monitor. She expected to see nothing, a familiar emptiness that would confirm what everyone believed. Instead, the doctor's face changed. "Madam Adaora," he said softly, eyes warming. "Congratulations. There is a strong heartbeat here. You are about 8 weeks pregnant." The words dropped into the room like a stone into deep water. For a moment, Adaora couldn't move. Her brain scrambled to rearrange every insult. Every doctor shrugged. Every time Tunde called her wasted years. A shape flickered on the screen, small, pulsing, impossibly alive. Tears blurred her vision before she even realized she was crying. Her hand reached for the monitor as if she could touch the tiny shadow inside her. Pregnant. The word felt unfamiliar and holy in her ears. That night, in the rented apartment with its stiff mattress and humming air conditioner, Adaora scrolled through her phone with trembling hands. The first thing her timeline offered her was a photo of Tunde and Cynthia dressed in white and green, fingers intertwined, captioned with a ring emoji and the words, "She said yes." Cynthia's bump pressed proudly against her dress as friends flooded the comments with congratulations. Adaora set the phone down slowly. The room felt both too small and too wide. She placed her palm over her stomach, feeling only the faintest flutter, like wings brushing from the inside. "You came at the right time," she whispered. In the days that followed, she returned to the hospital for blood work and routine checks. At the end of one visit, the doctor glanced at the scan again, brows pinching thoughtfully. "Everything looks fine," he said, "but there's something I would like us to watch closely. Sometimes we see signs that there might be more than one heartbeat. It's too early to be sure. Come back in 2 weeks, please." More than one. The phrase echoed through her mind as she stepped out into the noisy hospital corridor. She pressed her file against her chest, the city's chaos swirling around her, her future reshaping itself in quiet, invisible lines. Adaora walked back to the waiting Uber with one truth blazing brighter than the Lagos sun. Tunde had thrown her out convinced she was empty. He had no idea how full her life was about to become. The ache in Adaora's chest followed her for days after the doctor's words. More than one heartbeat. She wasn't sure whether to fear it or cradle the possibility, like a blessing still forming its wings. She kept it tucked close, a secret even from herself. She moved quietly, ate carefully, and slept when her body insisted. And then, one humid Thursday morning, her phone rang with a message that would pull her into a different storm entirely. Her uncle, Chief Ebuka Okori, was gone. The news flattened her. Chief Ebuka had been the one relative who never asked her why she wasn't pregnant yet, who never looked at her with pity or impatience. He lived abroad for most of the year, only visiting Nigeria for a handful of family events, but he always called her my Ada, the niece who listened more than she spoke. His absence felt like a door closing. The burial in Enugu came with all the theatrics of extended family, tears mixed with gossip, prayers mixed with side comments about her broken marriage and the big shame of Tunde's second engagement. Adaora swallowed their words like stones and focused on moving through each ritual without collapsing. She chose a simple black dress. Even then, relatives whispered, "She looks bloated, is it stress?" She came alone, as in completely alone. Marriage is not easy. She ignored them. Her uncle had taught her silence was a kind of power. After the burial, everyone gathered in a large hall for the reading of the will, a tradition Adaora usually found overwhelming. The mahogany tables stretched long, filled with aunts who never visited him, cousins who never called, and men who claimed to have been his closest advisors. The lawyer, a tall man with gold-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and began. properties,
shares, land,
vehicles, money. He read each allocation with a steady voice, delivering tiny earthquakes to different corners of the room. Whispers erupted after every name. Then he paused, lifted a different envelope, thicker, sealed with a wax stamp, and said, "Now the matter of Queensbridge Realty Group." The hall is still. Adaora blinked. Queensbridge? No one in the room even knew the full value of that company. Her uncle kept his real wealth quiet, layered under trusts and offshore holdings. Those who suspected its worth had only guesses. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked directly at her. "To my beloved niece, Adaora Adaoi, I leave all controlling shares, estates, and investment portfolios under Queensbridge Realty Group, valued at..." He glanced at the document. 3.8 billion naira. Gasps shot upward like sparks from a fire. Her aunt dropped her handbag. A cousin clutched his chest dramatically. Someone hissed, "This must be a mistake." Another muttered, "For her? The one with no child." But the lawyer raised a hand. The late chief specified clearly, "She is the only one who carries dignity without noise. She will not misuse wealth." Adaora couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred. Everything felt unreal, like she had stepped into someone else's destiny and was waiting to be escorted out. The pen trembled in her hand as she signed the acceptance documents. The lawyer's voice faded, replaced by the faint flutter in her abdomen, another reminder that her life had never been empty. When she walked out of the hall, the sun looked different. The road looked different. The world itself felt tilted in her direction for the first time in years. On the drive back to Lagos, she stared through the window of the hired car, watching trees blur into ribbons of green. Her mind was a whirlpool of grief, shock, suspicion, hope, and fear. She placed a hand over her still flat belly, her thumb brushing circles over the slight swell. "Your future just changed," she whispered. The city welcomed her with its usual noise, horns blasting, street vendors calling, okadas weaving like stubborn insects. But Adaora stepped into her Surulere street with a posture that surprised even her. She stood outside the duplex where Tunde had screamed at her to leave. The tiles still remembered the moment, still holding the echo of Cynthia's laughter. Adaora's breath tightened, but she didn't look away. This house would not define her. She wasn't here for closure. She was here to say goodbye to the version of herself that had begged for crumbs. She turned, walked away, and didn't look back. 2 days later, in a quiet service department in Ikeja GRA, Adaora spread her uncle's documents across the dining table. For hours she read account statements, scanned deeds of ownership, traced signatures of companies she never imagined were connected to her family. Her head spun. Her heart steadied. Her spirit rose. And then, while scrolling through the email folder her uncle's lawyer had transferred to her, she froze. There it was. A proposal for a major land acquisition. A multi-million naira development project. Filed under potential investor. Submitted by none other than Tunde Adaoi Enterprises. Adaora sank slowly into the chair, a faint, dangerous calm washing over her. Tunde had no idea the empire he was chasing already lived in her hands. Her lips parted in a small, disbelieving exhale. He had married Cynthia for a future he thought she couldn't give him. But fate, quiet, deliberate, and poetic, had placed his true future in the hands of the woman he pushed into the street. Adaora closed her laptop, one hand on her belly. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. And for the first time, the flutter inside her felt like agreement. For the first week in Ikeja GRA, Adaora moved through her new apartment like someone learning how to breathe again. The silence was different from the silence in Surulere. It wasn't heavy or accusing. It was clean. It was a possibility. Her uncle's files sat in neat stacks on the dining table, waiting for her to become someone she had never imagined she could be. Every morning, she lit the small lavender candle the caretaker left in the bathroom. Every evening, she walked to the balcony and let the evening breeze cool her skin. Her body was changing fast. Tiredness settled deep in her bones. Her ankles swelled easily. Her cravings swung between akara and cold oranges. But beneath the discomfort, there was a steady, growing fire in her spirit. She was not just Adaora anymore. She was the heir to Queensbridge Realty Group. And every decision she made from now on would shape the life growing quietly inside her. The transformation began slowly. Chief Ibuka's lawyer, Barrister Over, visited her twice a week. He arrived with files, diagrams, bank statements, and old photographs of the properties her uncle had kept hidden from the rest of the family. There are estates in Lekki Phase 1, Aja, and 2 in Abuja, he explained, adjusting his glasses as he spread out documents across her polished table. Some buildings are dormant. Others are leasing. Your uncle wanted you to revive everything. Adaora listened carefully, absorbing every word. She didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt awake, like her mind had been waiting for something to feed it this deeply. What do I do first? She asked. Barrister Over smiling. You take control. And she did. Within a month, she hired 3 people who would become the backbone of her quiet rise. First, Barrister Nene Iwobi, a sharp Lagos lawyer with a calm voice but eyes that missed nothing. Nene specialized in property disputes and corporate restructuring. She spoke to Adaora like an equal, never once treating her like a lost housewife. Second, Damilare Ogunlai, a brilliant young financial analyst with a mind sharp enough to catch errors at a glance. He wore round glasses and carried stress balls in his backpack, but he handled billions like pocket change. Third, Amara, a soft-spoken PA from Anambra, who understood the power of silence more than anyone Adaora had ever met. Amara anticipated needs before Adaora voiced them and guarded her privacy as if it were her own. Together, they became the beginning of something powerful. Adaora made one final decision to sever her past from her future. She shed the name Adaora Adeoi. Not in bitterness, but in clarity. She adopted her uncle's suggestion from an old letter he once wrote to her. If ever you need to start again, use the name Adanna. You look most like your mother when you hear it. And so, publicly, on documents, contracts, and corporate registrations, she became Adanna Cole, using her late mother's maiden name as armor. The business world began to whisper. Who is this new investor buying up dormant properties? Who is Adanna Cole signing Millionaire deals without public appearances? Is she foreign? Is she old money? Which politician is backing her? Adaora said nothing. Silence was her most loyal language. Meanwhile, across Lagos, Tunde and Cynthia's world glittered on Instagram. Cynthia posted photos of her baby shower shopping, her pregnancy glow, her manicured nails resting on her bump. Tunde posted pictures of himself inspecting lands that didn't exist yet, his captions drowning in empty confidence. But behind their polished smiles was a growing desperation. Tunde's loans were stacking. The investors he bragged about were pulling back. And the deal he believed would save his collapsing empire, the Queensbridge partnership, was stalled because the mysterious CEO had not signed. He didn't know the CEO was the woman he called Barren. He didn't know the documents he submitted were lying on her dining table at that very moment. One afternoon, the Damilare handed her a thick file and cleared his throat. Madam, you need to see this. Inside was a detailed report of Tunde's proposed project. Every figure was exaggerated. Every timeline is unrealistic. Every promise is built on sand. Adaora exhaled slowly, her hand unconsciously drifting to her belly. The babies fluttered softly, as if sensing her thoughts. He's building a kingdom made of paper, she murmured. Nene looked up from her laptop. Should we decline the deal? Adaora shook her head gently.
No.
We will continue for a while. She wasn't chasing revenge. She wasn't planning destruction. She simply wanted to reclaim her voice from the driveway where he had taken it. And then one Friday morning, her phone buzzed. Queensbridge must be represented physically at the signing, Nene said on the call. They need the CEO present. There's no way around it. Adaora didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window at the city she had once moved through quietly, the city where she had been humiliated, abandoned, and dismissed. Then she said softly, "Tell them I'll be there." Her hand rested on her belly again. Her children shifted. And the world, her world, felt ready. Because the woman walking into that meeting would not be the one Tunde threw out. She would be the one he never saw coming. The morning after Adanna confirmed she would attend the signing meeting, Lagos seemed unusually loud. Car horns, distant generators, the restless hum of the city. Everything reminded her how far she had come from the quiet humiliation of Surulere. Now, her days were filled with strategy sessions, property evaluations, and quiet, calculated decisions that carried the weight of empires. It was during one of these meetings, in her softly lit office overlooking Acadia GRA, that Millionaire placed a stack of documents before her: contracts, projected returns, maps, and an itemized breakdown of Tunde's proposed development deal. "Madam," he said gently, adjusting his glasses, "you need to look carefully at page 12. She flipped through. Then she saw it. The numbers were bold, confident, and completely dishonest. Inflated land value. Fabricated investor support. Deadlines no sane contractor would agree to. Tunde had built his new dream on charm, lies, and borrowed confidence. Her jaw tightened, not from anger, but from a deep, quiet clarity. Nene, sitting across the table, closed her laptop slowly. If Queensbridge signs this, we'll be tied to all his liabilities. It could drag your entire inheritance into a pit. Adaora leaned back in her chair, one hand resting on her belly as the babies shifted softly beneath her palm. The movement reminded her of that driveway, of the man who pointed at her stomach as if it held nothing but shame. She inhaled, then exhaled. "No," she said calmly. "We won't pull out. Not yet." Nene raised a brow. Millionaire blinked in confusion. "Madam, you want to continue?" he asked. "Yes," Adaora answered. "I want him to believe he's finally getting what he wants. Let him rely on this deal. Let him build his hopes on it. The truth will arrive at the signing table." Her voice was steady, almost soft. No bitterness, no spite, just the quiet determination of a woman reclaiming her power. The next few weeks unfolded like a quiet dance of strategy. Queensbridge sent polite emails. They requested more documents. They scheduled meetings, postponed them, and rescheduled again. And Tunde, desperate for validation, drowning in loans, trying to impress Cynthia and her expanding bump, jumped at every request. He presented himself as a visionary, a man on the edge of greatness. On Instagram, he bragged about international partners. To Cynthia, he whispered about global investors. To his friends, he declared that Queensbridge's CEO was lucky to work with him. He had no idea the CEO was the woman he told to leave before he changed the locks. While Tunde posted photos in suits he couldn't afford, Adaora visited the empty plots he claimed were under development. Some were overgrown with weeds. Others were owned by entirely different companies. She walked the site slowly, hand resting on her belly, watching the sun set over the uneven land. "This is the empire he mocked me for not supporting me?" she whispered. Amara, standing beside her, nodded quietly. "Men like him survive on the noise they create. Madam, you survive on the silence you command." Adaora smiled faintly. Silence had indeed become her sharpest weapon. Meanwhile, Cynthia's pregnancy made her bolder. Posting videos about being a future billionaire wife, forcing Tunde into baby shopping sprees they could barely afford, arguing whenever he hesitated. "Why is this deal taking so long?" she would snap. "It's normal," Tunde lied. Big investors move slowly. But behind closed doors, fear stalked him. Creditors were calling. A car dealer wanted his balance. An investor threatened to pull out unless Queensbridge confirmed. And still, Adaora waited. Her nights were long. Her back aching, her feet swelling, her unborn child reminding her of every step she had taken to get here. But she kept going. She attended board meetings, signed contracts, strengthened her empire. One evening, as she stood at her balcony, watching the soft Lego sunset, her phone buzzed. It was Nene. "The final signing meeting has been scheduled," she said. "Victoria Island. 2 weeks from today. And the board insists. The CEO must attend in person." A breeze swept across Adaora's skin. Her children kicked. Her heart steadied. "Good," she said. "Let him have his audience. Let him enjoy the last days of his fantasy." She turned away from the balcony, her silhouette framed against the fading light. "Because when I walk into that room," she whispered, "he will finally meet the woman he tried to break." And somewhere across Lagos, unaware of the storm building around him, Tunde celebrated a victory that was never his claim. The morning of the signing dawned with a sharp, golden clarity that Lagos rarely offered. Victoria Island shimmered beneath the sunlight, glass buildings waking like giants stretching toward the sky. For Tunde, it felt like destiny calling his name. For Adaora, now Adanna Cole, it felt like the final chapter of a story that began on a dusty driveway in Surulere. She dressed slowly, deliberately. A soft cream maternity dress tailored to her expanding belly, a blazer that framed her shoulders with subtle authority, and simple gold earrings that had belonged to her mother. Her reflection looked calm, elegant, and untouchable. Her babies moved as if reminding her she wasn't walking into this alone. "Let's finish this," she whispered. At the same hour, across Lagos, Tunde buttoned his navy suit and sprayed cologne-like armor. His smile in the mirror was wide, too wide. Cynthia hovered behind him in a glittering green gown, her baby bump pronounced, her lips painted in the same shade of confidence she wore the day she mocked Adaora. "After today," she said, adjusting his tie, "we level up. You'll finally be the man you're supposed to be." He kissed her forehead and grinned. "By the end of this meeting, Queensbridge will depend on me." Cynthia laughed, high, sharp, triumphant. Neither imagined whose footsteps were already walking toward their undoing. The boardroom sat on the 19th floor of a glass tower on Ozumbambadu. The view stretched endlessly across the lagoon, blue, bright, breathtaking. Inside, everything gleamed: polished table, leather chairs, untouched bottles of water lined like soldiers. Investors filled the room, men in tailored suits, women in sleek gowns, bankers with cautious eyes. They murmured among themselves, flipping through documents, waiting for the elusive CEO of Queensbridge Realty to arrive. Tunde walked in like a man entering paradise. His smile stretched from ear to ear. "Good morning, distinguished partners," he announced, voice dripping with charm. "Let's make history today." Cynthia followed closely, wearing a victorious smirk. She placed a manicured hand on a shoulder, as if staking her claim. Everyone turned. Everyone waited. Then the door opened. Footsteps, slow, steady. Adaora entered. Her cream dress glowed beneath the boardroom lights. Her belly curved gracefully, undeniable, radiant. Her posture, calm, composed, made the entire room fall silent. The only sound was the soft echo of her heels against marble. Tunde's smile collapsed. Cynthia's lips parted in disbelief. Adaora said nothing at first. She simply walked to the head of the table, placed a slim brown folder on the polished wood, and lifted her chin. One of the investors spoke first. "Madam, may we confirm, are you the representative from Queensbridge?" Adaora smiled gently. "No," she replied. "I am Queensbridge." Whispers exploded around the table. "I am Adanna Cole," she continued, voice smooth as silk. "Majority owner and chief executive officer of Queensbridge Realty Group." Tunde staggered a step backward as if someone had punched the air out of his lungs. "Impossible," he croaked. "It can't be you. You're your ex-wife." Adaora finished calmly.
Yes.
"The same woman you said was barren. The same woman you chased out like a stray dog." Her tone held no anger, just the truth sharpened into glass. Cynthia grabbed Tunde's arm, panic rising. "Tunde, you didn't tell me your ex-wife owned." "She doesn't," he snapped, face paling. Adaora opened her folder. "Before we proceed," she said gracefully, I need to address several issues. She pulled out documents, photocopies, stamped papers, and highlighted figures. She slid them across the table, each sheet a silent bullet. First, she said, this entire project is built on manipulated data.
Gasps.
Second, the land you claim to control is already under a different lease. More murmurs. Third, your company is, as of last month, insolvent. The room erupted. Investors shouted questions. Phones buzzed. Lawyers scribbled notes. Someone stormed out of the room.
Tunde tried to speak.
Adaora, please listen. You had your chance to speak in Surulere, she said softly. Then she closed the folder. And finally, I decline this partnership on behalf of Queensbridge Realty. Silence dropped like thunder. This project ends today, she said. Good luck rebuilding your company without my signature. She gathered her documents, lifted her blazer from the chair, and stepped away from the table. The moment she reached the door, Tunde ran after her. Adaora, he shouted, voice cracking. Please, let's talk. Please. Cynthia, she this. Adaora, I didn't know. She turned, looked at him, really looked. Not with love, not with pain, but with a peace he could never destroy. My name is Adanna now, she said quietly, and you no longer have the power to break me. She left him standing in the hallway, shaking, breathless, undone. Inside the boardroom, Cynthia collapsed into a chair, eyes wide, as the empire she and Tunde built on lies crumbled around them. And down the hallway, her belly leading her forward, Adaora walked toward the elevator with the steady grace of a woman who had finally returned to herself. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't sought revenge. She had simply told the truth and watched the world rearrange itself. The fallout began before Adaora even reached the elevator. Investors were already calling their offices, pulling funds, freezing accounts, demanding explanations. Tunde's phone rang nonstop. The creditors, partners, journalists, all clawing at the cracks that had finally split open. By the time he reached the lobby, the empire he bragged about had already begun to collapse. Meanwhile, Adaora stepped into her waiting car with the calmness of a woman who had already made peace with everything she left behind. She rested a hand on her belly. The babies fluttered softly, as if celebrating the quiet victory she had delivered without lifting a fist. No shouting, no threats, no scenes. Just truth. And truth was enough to bring a liar to his knees. In the weeks that followed, Lagos turned Tunde's downfall into whispers carried across lounges, barbershops, and Instagram gossip pages. He forged documents. Cynthia didn't know? I heard Queensbridge pulled out.
Ah.
That man is finished. Cynthia's green dresses disappeared from social media. Her captions about my king and our empire dried up. Her pregnancy made her tired, irritable, and increasingly resentful as the man she worshipped could no longer afford even the baby items she flaunted online. Within a month, the first eviction notice arrived. By the second month, she moved out. Her voice note to Tunde was short, sharp, and merciless. I didn't sign up for poverty. And just like that, the woman he destroyed his marriage for vanished when the lights went off. Adaora watched all of it unfold from a distance. Not with joy, not with spite, but with the quiet certainty of someone who finally understood her own strength. Her focus was elsewhere. On her unborn baby, on her health, on Queensbridge, on the peace she fought to reclaim. When the contractions came early one dawn, she was rushed to a private hospital in Adaora, the same one her uncle had once donated a wing to. The nurses recognized her file immediately and treated her with reverence. Hours later, under soft white lights, with the scent of antiseptic and lavender in the air, Adaora gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She cried when they placed him on her chest, tears that tasted nothing like the tears she shed in Surulere. These tears were warm, cleansing, full of a new beginning she had earned with every step she'd taken away from pain. She named him Chikama, God knows better. Because truly, only God could have rewritten her life in such a poetic, impossibly perfect way. News travels fast in Lagos. 3 days after the birth, Tunde appeared at the hospital reception, unshaven, trembling, a bouquet of cheap flowers in his shaking hands. I heard she gave birth, he told the nurse, voice cracking. Please, I need to see her. Please. The nurse looked at him with a mix of pity and professionalism. I'll ask, she said. Inside her room, Adaora was feeding her newborn when the nurse knocked gently. Madam, your husband, sorry, your ex, wants to see you. Adaora paused, not out of fear, not out of longing, but out of a strange, quiet curiosity that comes when an old wound returns asking for closure. Let him in, she said. The door opened slowly. Tunde stepped inside like a broken man entering church, small, humbled, stripped of everything but shame. His eyes immediately found the baby in her arms. He froze, breath hitching. Adaora.
His voice dissolved.
Oh God, he's mine? She nodded gently. Tunde's knees buckled. He clasped his hands together like someone begging for life. I'm sorry, he whispered, tears falling freely. I wronged you. I wronged this child. I wronged God.
Please don't shut me out.
I want to be in his life. Adaora stared at him quietly, her expression unreadable. She didn't shout. She didn't remind him of the driveway. She didn't ask why he mocked her tears and celebrated another woman's womb. She simply said, you may be in his life, but never again in mine. It wasn't revenge. It was freedom. Tunde cried harder, but Adaora felt nothing but calm, a deep, anchored calm that came from choosing herself at last. Weeks later, a soft breeze swept through one of the completed Queensbridge estates in Lekki Phase 1 as Adaora walked slowly through the compound, her baby strapped securely to her chest. Sunlight danced against the newly painted buildings. Workers greeted her with respect. Investors nodded with admiration. She belonged here, not as someone's wife, not as someone's shame, but as a woman who rebuilt her life with quiet precision. She paused near the entrance gate, letting the warm wind brush her face. Once, she stood on a driveway while a man pointed at her stomach and called her useless. Now, she stood at the entrance of an empire he would never touch. Her son stirred against her chest. She smiled, kissed his forehead, and whispered, Your father thought he replaced a weak woman. He didn't know he was building the woman who controls everything he ever wanted. And with quiet footsteps, Adanna Cole walked boldly into the life she crafted with her own hands. The life her genius created.